Hey everyone, I am just about to jump inside the Heart Place Yoga Studio and teach yoga, and I decided to come on. I feel like I've been doing a bit of content lately and it's all been about me and my journey, and that has had intention of service and sharing, because I don't know about you, but sometimes the most deeply connecting, profound, heart-opening experiences and help that I've got is from hearing somebody else's story and sharing in their experiences. And I've not felt so alone in my own, or I've been able to joyfully celebrate theirs. And that said, I wanted to come on very intentionally and offer a little bit of heartfulness, because lately I've been putting a lot of joy and playfulness and celebratory stuff, because I was going through a tough time with my gut health and been feeling a lot better, and I tend to have a playful nature, so that's how I've been communicating it. But I know a lot of people, and life's tough, right? Life's tough. And a lot of people are going through a lot of tough things right now. And one of the reasons I think for me that I can still have a friend of mine and we used to call it easy access to joy. So one of the reasons why I can still have that amidst everything else, amidst the heartache, is because of something that I've cultivated over the years. And it came up in a client session today because we were talking about validation. And she's like, oh yeah, if I'm at work and one of my colleagues tells me I've done a good job, is that what you mean? And I was like, yeah, that's one type of validation. And that's the validation of your performance. It's the validation of, yeah, you've done a good job, which for many of us, myself included, I grew up with that being the primary way that I felt I could get validation, and therefore I would seek validation. And it got me into my addiction, work addiction, workaholism, achievement addiction, overstudying. And one of the other types of validation that exist is the validation of being. One of my favorite teachers, Sarah Payton, calls it resonance. And it simply means my whole being and my whole system says to your whole being and your whole system, you make sense. And you don't need to do anything. You don't need to perform. You don't need to be any different than you are to be loved and to be okay. And the ideal experience is that we have this when we're growing up, but often it's hard for us to receive this because our parents are so stressed and I won't go into all that side of things, but let's just say for most of us, we haven't had that, and our brains don't know how to do that for ourselves. In learning to do that, I have a brain now that is self-validating, is resonant, is warm. When things go quiet, most of the time inside my head, things are quite pleasant towards myself. And it was not always like this. This was not always the case. And what I have learned to do is practice validation. And the first steps of validation are to acknowledge and be with what is and what is there. Sensations in our bodies, feelings in our hearts, thoughts in our minds, and the underlying needs of our souls, of our beings, that these things are expressive of. And being able to hold an energy for yourself that says, you feel sad because you're longing for connection right now, and that makes sense, is huge. So I encourage you, in whatever way you can do this, to turn towards yourself and to investigate. And it can be awkward and weird, and I had to literally break down all the micro mini skills and steps that were involved in developing this capacity. I broke it down into tiny little skill sets and trained in each individual one, and then trained in how I link them together, because that's the way I operate. Naming sensations, naming emotions, naming underlying needs, looking at the connections between them, looking at the way that you can language a request to self that's resonant, And in that process, it has become integrated for me that that's what my brain kind of does now. But in the beginning, as you're beginning to explore, how do I actually validate myself? Because a lot of my clients, this is part of the work that I do, a lot of my clients are like, yeah, I've had all the psychoeducation stuff at work, or we get told to put in boundaries, or we get told to love ourselves, or we get told to practice validation, but what actually is it? And that's where I specialize, what it is. How do I do this thing? What is it and how do I do it? So self-validation is a turning towards yourself with a warm and curious energy, being able to witness and name your own experience, to understand it, and to offer empathy in language to yourself. But in the beginning, if you don't know how to do this, if you want to learn, come to some of my yoga classes because I teach it in there as well. In the beginning, it can just simply be with your attention turning towards yourself and trying it out and saying to yourself, whatever you've got going on, I'm sure it makes sense, even if you don't know if it makes sense, right? You can just, it probably makes sense. It's happening. So there is a reason for it. If there's a reason for it, that reason is reasonable because it's a reason. And you make sense. And what do you need? And just see what happens. It's worth trying, maybe. All right. I'm going to go in. I'm going to move and breathe and invite some more people to connect to their inner longings and their inner needs and to validate themselves.